to grow up then. Next, going to England as a child and actually seeing the coronation of Queen Elizabeth and watching Winston Churchill wave to the crowds as he entered number 10 Downing Street. The assassination of JFK. I have interesting connections here, strange happenings. The music of the 60s and 70s, watching it unfold, explode, hypnotize, and carry away millions of people all over the world. It still breathes into our hearts and minds. The struggle of a lifetime trying to change the political situation here on planet Earth day by day started early and kept at it up the whole way. Few, if any, victories in the entire mess, but much fun and surprises. Farm stories that seem both far away and so close, so recent, so wonderfully poignant and funny and meaningful. All of these stories are now hazy, hard to define. I will try and capture some of the sounds, the colors, the smells, the textures of a long life. I will forget much and will avoid some truths that are too painful to relate. I will never be able to give full glory to what I have in my mind, but I will try. I will try. To begin, I will relate a farm story that will be remembered by many and that will be told in different ways by different folks. Let's start with describing what I mean by farm stories. What farm? When? And how? I will keep it short and simple because the reality is staggeringly complex, confusing, and disagreed upon. But we must start somewhere. The farm was not a planned experience. Never was. It just rolled forth, splashing across time and space with uncontrolled vigor and stamina. I might try and make some sense of it one day, but I doubt it. Too difficult. So let's just give a few facts and clues. My folks are from this area in West Virginia. My mother's side are Forths, Forths. Nice Scottish name. Not a lot of them, but they were interesting bunch. My people fought on the Union side in the Civil War. My grandfather was, let me see what I said in the end of that. My grandfather was born in 1883. He left West Virginia and went to Texas to work in the oil fields. The farm was not a planned experience. Oh, wait a second. Here's where I am. He, like many folks, well, West Virginians especially, put that in. He always wanted to come home and see his kin when he could. I began to return with my grandparents each summer starting in 1953. These country summer days were wonderful for a city boy. Playing across the hills, swinging on grapevines, swimming in the creeks, helping in the garden, eating my nana's cooking and visiting with cousins, making ice cream in those wooden grinders, crickets and fireflies in the evenings. I spent these summers in a green heaven with my kind and generous grandparents who adored me. This went on each summer until I began to play football in junior high school and wanted to be with my friends in the summer, swimming and chasing girls. Eventually, the time came when we were out of school and living the life of the counterculture with our hippie cohorts. Back to the land became a seductive mantra for our generation, wishing to escape the capitalist nightmare of racism, sexism, and imperialism, whatever those crimes meant to each of us individually. I bought the first land and invited others to buy more on the same hills that I had run across as a kid. People came here and from all over and fell in love with the beauty and the challenge and the music and the incredible group of young people they found forming around them. This birth and formation story could take years to write down. I will leave it for later and just relate one of our many crazy nights that opened before us as we gathered here to build a new life together. The night of the snakes. Somebody had heard about the snake handlers holding one of their Saturday night church gatherings over on 5 and 20. Many creeks in our area are named after how long they were. Maybe it was announced in the Hurricane Breeze, the little newspaper that my fourth family still printed. Billy Jack was determined to go, so we all piled into his little Datsun pickup that had a strange and useless geodesic dome on its back. We all believed in Buckminster Fuller then. So here we are, all these hippies clinging onto the dome, laughing, smoking, and turning the radio up. Fortunately, there were few cops to be to be worried about in those days. Over the mountain ridge to 5 and 20, and then going all the way up the holler to the head, we found the old wooden church with its windows swung out to let in the air. Those snake handlers always prayed on Saturday night and they didn't want to compete with the Baptists. And they always drew a big crowd of local rednecks drinking beer and chewing tobacco and getting rowdy. The first thing we heard as we walked up was a woman saying, "You're those hippies from over on Benedict, ain't you?" Our reputation had spread. We all said, "Yes, ma'am, and how do you do?" The scene was getting wilder each minute as more trucks pulled up and more beer was sucked down. The growing crowd was starting to get a little excited and anxious. Where was them snakes? We done drove all the way out this bumpy 5 and 20 to see the show. Let's get it on. Out of one of the big plywood 4x8 windows, an old man leaned out and he shouted as loud as he could, "The snakes is on their way." Turns out he was one of the main preachers and had been informed that the snake truck had broke down a mile away and had to be fixed. "Take it easy, folks. The snakes is on the way." Then he got the music started by the Handler Band that consisted of about 7 men and women playing guitars and pianos and a stand-up bass, rattling tambourines and wailing voices were calling God to accept their devotions. Finally, up pulled a snake and the boxes were carried inside the back door. Now, not just anybody was gonna be allowed to actually handle these deadly snakes, but we were all willing to get first in line to see the action. Seems we paid $1 and they let us sit in the long church building. The main preachers wrapped these snakes around their necks and down their arms while speaking in tongues and slow dancing. One of them had a copperhead on top of his head. This was enough to make a hippie breathe deep and keep their hands down to their sides. As the preachers came down the middle aisle, the snakes were passed only to a few elect folks who were recognized by the leaders as true believers. I was impressed by a certain woman close by who knew what she was taking a real chance, but who seemed to deeply feel the spirit of the Bible admonition. Those who have real faith in the Lord are not afraid to handle serpents or to drink poison.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, the entire crowd inside and out in the woods was gasping and yelling as the music played on. Slowly the snakes were put away. No one was bitten this night. As the bizarre music began to die down, the crowd filed out of the old wooden camp church and down the steep steps. We discussed the feeling of complete release that we had witnessed. We went back down the old road with a certain reverence for these crazy mountain folks who had risked their lives for a God we could not connect with. But we could feel the cool night air and that warm glow as we went back up Benedict and entered our free zone, a place where the snakes stayed in their holes. About a month later, we read a small story in the Gazette about a snake handler preacher who had died a few days earlier after he received his third snake bite. About a month later, his snake bite, he had 3 snake bites in 5 years. The picture showed us the old man who had leaned out the window shouting, "The snakes is on their way."